Hi, my name's Brittany, and I am the owner, reader, everything behind Green Mountain Intuitive Healing. I wanted to make a video that introduces me and who I am and how I came to be where I'm at right now. I have been a medium my entire life, and I didn't know it until a couple of years ago, and I didn't really fully believe it and embrace it until about maybe 6 months to a year ago. I was said that I was an intuitive healer, and knew that that was very true for me. But the mediumship stuff took a little bit longer. And I wanted to walk you through parts of my journey around that. So I have always had a love for things that were metaphysical. I got my first tarot deck when I was probably like 10 or 12. And I was obsessed with like the tumbled stones when I was a kid. Anytime we would go to a museum or something like that, that is the treasure that I would bring home. And in undergrad, I was able to take a Reiki class and be attuned to Reiki levels 1 and 2. And also was introduced to pendulum work at that time and really enjoyed that form of divination for myself. And that's work that I've incorporated into my life since then. And then, living where I do now, there's a really cool little metaphysical store a couple towns away. And I had gone in there a few times, and I had gotten they had someone that used to do like facial, like massage stuff with crystals and Reiki. And so I would go get stuff done. And then on Valentine's Day of 2021, my dad passed away really suddenly. And that prompted me to find a medium because I was really hurting and was just sort of hoping that he would come through and could maybe give me some answers. And he did. And the other thing in that is my great-grandmother also came through. And so the man that passed was technically my stepdad. He met my mom when I was 2, and he raised me. He's my dad. But I do have a biological dad that is not in my life at this time. And his grandmother, so my great-grandmother on my biological line, my bloodline, back in her day, was one of the first licensed clairvoyants in Vermont. And she made quite a name for herself doing readings. She read tea leaves, and she could remote view. So oftentimes when people were missing their keys, their cattle, they would go to her, and she could describe the location of those missing items. She had amazing intuition and knew when my grandparents' farm burned, she knew something was gonna happen because she could sense it. And she even worked with the state police at one point to help find a missing child. So she really was quite gifted. And I heard these stories growing up and always just wished that that's what I could do. But I also have a thing called aphantasia, which we can talk about in another video. But in my mind, so like a lot of times in the spiritual world, right, we'll talk about third eye and viewing things. my mind is blank, and so remote viewing is out of the question. And so I think I also didn't understand my mediumship for a long time because I thought you had to see things to be a medium. So in this journey, I have let go of how things maybe should be done in my brain and just embraced how I do this work. So I have this history of this like really cool family lore and this interest in these things, and then I go and have this reading after my dad has passed, and in that reading I'm told, this is your birthright. It's okay to access my great-grandmother through spirit communication, even if I'm not talking to my biological line, and that doesn't feel like a fit for me, but she's willing to help me, and that it is absolutely okay for me to do. And that prompted some research on my part. I'm a person who really, really loves gathering information, and probably too much information, right? If you follow me on any social media, you'll know that I've talked about that recently, of like sometimes it can be a detriment to myself because I stay stuck in that information gathering phase and I don't just always lean in and trust that things are happening. But I started gathering information. The same woman that I did a reading with, I signed up for some of her courses. I signed up and I do monthly coaching with her now, and really embraced at first the intuitive side. So not tapping into necessarily spirit communication, but tapping into the energy of the people in front of me and doing readings for them and their highest good. And that's what we're doing with tarot cards, and that's what we're doing with pendulum work, right? But I'm just doing it with my own senses. And again, not being able to see in my mind's eye, I use a lot of body sensations, and occasionally I'll get like some auditory things. And sometimes just it's that clear cognizance, just that clear knowing that this is what happens. And in my day job, I'm a therapist, and there are times where questions will come out of me. Like I'll be working with a client, we'll be processing whatever, they brought to the table that day, and I will ask a question. And for whatever reason, I just know that's the question to ask at that moment. And you can see their face pause and sort of stop and look at me like, wow, I have never thought about it like that. Or, yeah, you are spot on. That is exactly what I've been trying to communicate or make someone else understand or whatever it might be. And I think that is also that clear knowing just like coming through. So I've been developing that for a while. I've been doing those readings for a while, and I love doing them. And then finally this year, so it's only actually been a couple of months, that I have been able to discern when spirit is around and what is theirs and what is mine. And I'm still in that process. I'm still learning. It's been a lot of fun. And in the last couple of years where I've been working with my coach, I've realized I've been doing this my entire life, and I didn't recognize that that's what I was doing because I believed, and I think we're all sort of taught or shown that there's one way to do mediumship, and that is to basically see ghosts, right? And that's different, right? I think that's true too, but it's different. And so reflecting back on it, there have been a couple of instances where I'm like, oh, that's why that happened. So when I was a kid, we lived in this house, and there was not a ton of space in the backyard. There was some, maybe like enough to drive like a couple of cars through. But right at the edge of that was this big ledge, huge. And my bedroom window faced this ledge, and I would often draw my shades. And I just had what I thought as an 8, 9, 10-year-old, maybe even younger kid was just a weird thought. Now, as I'm older, I would have called it maybe an intrusive thought, that there was someone at the top of the ledge in the tree line watching me. And I was petrified that I was going to be shot through my window by whoever was watching me at the top of the ledge in the line of trees. So I would draw my shades, and my mom would come in and be like, let the natural light in here. And I'd be like, I like them closed. Obviously, if I was going to be shot through a window, no shades would have protected me. But, as like an 8-year-old, like that's kind of how you think. And I always felt like someone was watching me. So that those shades were like a layer of protection. Now you can't see me. Now you don't know I'm here. Now you can't shoot me, I guess. I'm not sure. But I always was really worried that I was going to be sniped through a window. What I know now is that was probably a spirit. And that might have been them actually showing me how they died, and how they had passed. So I haven't been back to that property in a while, and I'd be curious to go back now and just like see what I pick up. But I really think that was some early young examples of mediumship. In undergrad, I initially started as a nursing major. That did not work out. They asked me to leave, 6 weeks into the semester. They were like, you can't hack this. But I was already signed up for anatomy, and the professor was incredible. He made learning fun and engaging, and so I ended up sticking with anatomy 1 and actually also went on to take anatomy 2. And when we started learning about bones, I was so uncomfortable because we had actual cadaver skeletons. And I was mostly okay with the body bones. I didn't love it. But the skulls. So holding what was someone's head at some point. Even now, right? Like talking about it, I'm like, oh, I could not do it. It freaked me out. I was like, I will take the plastic or whatever substitute bone material one. I will learn all of the occipital foramen in that, because I was like, I am not holding what used to be somebody's head. These were all ethically sourced, right? These were people that donated their bodies to science. Logically, totally fine. Nobody else in my class seemed to have an issue with it, but it made me incredibly uncomfortable. I'm realizing now, again, probably because I was sensing stuff in the bones. I had a deeper connection that this used to be a human, and I was having a hard time removing that from it and just focusing on the science. And I'm a total science and math nerd. I love science, but I couldn't separate those two out in those moments. So, going back to having this stuff as a kid, it sort of coming out again when I was in undergrad, and then losing my dad. Here in this house, for like the last, I would say, year, he's almost a year old, so, but this was happening before we got our puppy, but I will take him down around 10 o'clock for his last like potty break of the night. And again, I was getting what I would have called at that time a year ago, and that was either if I was getting up to run to the bathroom or come down and get a drink or whatever, what I would have called an intrusive thought of falling down the stairs. And I never felt like I was being pushed. I never felt scared. I never felt like that was actually going to happen. But at night, anytime I would go down our stairs, I just had this thought of like, be careful, you're going to fall. And would be extra cautious walking down the stairs. And then as I started developing more, I was like, oh, I think there's a little boy on our stairs. I've heard the creak on the landing a couple of times. I've heard giggling. And I know now, right, that that's not an intrusive thought. That's him trying to show me. So I think he passed from falling down the stairs. And again, it didn't feel like he was pushed. It doesn't feel like he wasn't out to harm me, right? Like, it was just always this like, oof, be careful, you're gonna fall. Like, this feels really unsteady. And I would grab both railings and I would, or like, you know, brace my hand on the wall and grab the railing and then grab the other railing as I get closer down. And it just always felt unsteady. And like a full-on tumble headfirst down the stairs is what I thought was going to happen. So I would really brace myself. And I think it was him showing me what happened to him. And so since then, I've really been intentional about opening up my own ability to communicate. I get most of my stuff in that in-between space as I'm falling asleep at night. That is the space where I'm relaxed enough, where I am able to shut off my rational, logical brain enough to just allow the communication to happen. I think I get a lot of communication in dreams. I think I do a lot of travel in my dreams. I wake up often very unrested and feeling like I've experienced a lot. And I was able to hear, so I could hear my name being called in the car one day. And this is why I think it's hard, because it sounds like just thinking. So again, I don't have the pictures in my brain, but I do have narration, right? And it feels like constant chatter. If you know anyone that's neurodivergent or has ADHD and has narration in their brain, because we all don't have that, it feels like constant noise in there. And sometimes it's like learning to figure out like what you're thinking versus like just like noise that takes up space. And I heard my name, and it was in my own thinking voice, right? So I'm not like hearing other voices. But the way it was said, I was like, huh, that's my grandma. I knew instantly. Because when I would be in trouble, she would use my middle name, right? And so I heard a Brittany Lane in my head. And again, in my own thinking voice, so hard to differentiate. Like, why would I be thinking about that? But exactly in the tone that she would have said it when I was like being naughty. And it happened when I was driving. And driving again, so for me, it's that in-between space before bed, in the shower, and driving. Those are my three places where I very regularly get spirit communication. Because again, I'm relaxed enough my brain is able to shift there, but it's like occupied enough on the task that I'm doing that, the like chattery part and the like logical part is doing something, so I can step sideways enough to access spirit communication, right? So I'm driving and I hear Brittany Lane, just how she would have said it when I was in trouble. And she's like, okay, we're going to pay attention to this. And the next thought that comes up was my cousin who lives in my grandparents' house. And from there, it was the height chart that we had, when you draw the little mark on the wall and maybe put the initials or the name and the date. And she made me feel like my cousin senses her in that home, and he was doing some renovations, and she was showing me like, please keep this, right? This like height chart. So I got home and I texted my cousin and I was like, hey, like, do you sense her in the house? Like, for whatever reason, I felt really compelled after hearing my name and being like connected to him and then connected to some of the stuff in the house. I felt really compelled to reach out to him. And I think she was trying to get me to check in. And so I texted him, and turns out like he had been going through some hard stuff in his personal life. And, he's the kind of person that does everything for everyone, and maybe could have used a check-in and would have never asked for it. And I think it was her way of knowing, like, I know if I nudge Brittany, she'll do this, and he could probably use it. And so it was just a funny little way of nudging me along and her showing up, and was like, it felt very much like, this is what you need to do. And so that prompted me to reach out to him. And then I've done a reading for him, and we've had some other family come through, and that was really, really cool. And it was nice to have someone who maybe believes but doesn't understand fully validate for me, because I could just say whatever. And my cousin and I have a really lovely relationship, and I never feel judged by him. So I knew that I could test these skills out with him, and that I could text him and say anything of like, hi, like, our grandma that has passed away is encouraging me to reach out to you right now. That would never faze him. And so I think so much of this mediumship journey has been releasing fear. Fear of judgment of other people is a huge one, that people are going to think that I'm nuts. I work in the mental health field. If I say something around like hearing voices, right? Does that put my license at jeopardy? Does that, like, what does that mean to other people? Because for a lot of professionals in mental health, that could be really scary. And so having to be careful about who I share some of these things with, or worrying about just like the social aspect of being judged, right? And, people not believing or feeling really uncomfortable. I've had people tell me I was going to hell. I've had people say it's so scary, I'm glad you don't do it, right? That was the messaging I got when I was a kid of like, I'm glad you can't see things because it's really scary. And I'm like, cool, I didn't see it, but I could feel it, and I was drawing my shades every day. Like, it was still really scary. But it's fine. I'm okay. And so I think that is, part of it. And so for me, so much of this journey has been here my whole life. How do I embrace it? How do I let go of the fear? How do I discern when things are mine versus spirit communicating with me? And who do I share this with? And I'm in a space now where I want to share it with everyone, where if you don't agree, if you don't like it, that's okay. Like, you don't have to believe what I believe. I don't believe a lot of things that other people believe. This is my journey, and it's for me. And the people that want to be on this journey with me will be, and the people that don't. And that's okay. Not everything has to be for everyone. But yeah, so I knew that my cousin would, even if he was like skeptical, right? Because it's not really something we've all ever talked about, so I don't know what people believe. That he would not judge me. Like, I could literally text him anything, and so he was able to validate a lot of really cool stuff for me when I did a reading down at his house, which, like I said, is my grandparents' house, and validate, and I think that's one of the first times in mediumship that I've felt really witnessed as a reader, because it's one of the first times that I've read for someone else, and I did it in person, and it was really cool. He could see the changes in my body and the twitching. So I often will close my eyes to try to like make sense of just like all the information that's coming to me and get rid of any other distractions. And during that reading, my eyes were like really twitchy, and like I felt like I couldn't relax, and I felt so fidgety and like just sort of keyed up. And when the spirit left, I could feel my body just go, and it was just like, I went from, twitching and like just unable to settle to fully like relaxing. And he said to me, I just watched that happen. And that was validating on like a reading level, but also on a personal level of like, okay, this has been witnessed. I'm not making this up, right? I'm not like somehow in some weird altered reality or altered state or just like pulling it out my ass, right? Like, you just saw me. And I think that is also another really big part of this. So at this point, I'm probably rambling, but I just wanted to give a full picture of like, how did I start? How did I get here? What has that process looked like? And that means developing for my own self. That means the support that I've gotten. That means the training that I do. That means, the whole ups and downs of the emotional bits of this, because there are emotional bits to this. And I think it's important, if you want to develop your mediumship, if you want to develop your intuition, if you ever want to offer readings, even if it's not professionally, but it's like something that you incorporate into your day-to-day life, right? Like, I incorporate a lot of intuitive readings and intuitive information into my day-to-day life. It's who I am. I can't shut it off. Sometimes we have to reckon with that. And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And what are our boundaries and our ethics and things like that around some of this? And so I think for me, it's important to talk about, not just the developing pieces of the skill of learning, because that will come, but also what personal work you have to do in order to accompany that, because I think they have to go hand in hand. I think we're all born with these abilities, right? But I don't think you just like wake up one day and you're like, this is fabulous, and I don't feel any shame or judgment or have any worry or fear or whatever, right? Often, unless maybe you grew up with parents that were also mediums and you just like got this training from a super early age. I did not. And I think that's something else we should talk about. It's like, because I think kids are super powerful and we should embrace that a little bit more. But I think, for most of us who maybe haven't had that, there's a really long emotional journey that goes with it, of releasing fear and doubt and confusion and all kinds of other things. I'm really lucky to have an amazing partner who supports me 100 million %. He is like, Brittany, you do you. His only rule is he doesn't want anybody. So we often have spirits around the house now, because both my kiddo and I, and my husband, although he's not really interested in developing it, I don't think, can all communicate. And his boundary is he needs sleep, and he's like, I don't want to be messed with when I'm sleeping. And I'm like, oh, you want to visit me in a dream? As long as you're not waking me up, I don't really care. He's like, hard stop. Do not wake me up. Do not, like, I don't want any of it. I just want to enjoy my peace. I want to enjoy my sleep. But I think, having a super supportive husband and a kiddo that's really curious about it is really helpful too. And so much of this is just finding the right people. I had been given 3 or 4 names for mediums to go to when my dad passed, and there were reasons that the other ones weren't a good fit. There was a reason I was drawn to the one I was drawn to. There's a reason I'm still working with her 4 years later, 5 years later, 4 years later. Yeah, there's a reason. And so I think finding the people that are going to build you up, that are going to support you, that aren't going to judge you, that allow you to make mistakes. And, I'm not going to get every reading right. I'm not going to get everything perfect. But people that allow you to make mistakes and build you up, in all of these journeys is really, really huge. So outside of mediumship, you just heard I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I have a puppy, I'm a therapist by day. I would love to tell you all the story about the owls at some point. You heard that I'm neurodivergent, and I have ADHD, and I have aphantasia. So again, that's the mind blindness. I really love to cook. I love to bake. It's spring, so we're thinking about planting our garden and what we're going to plant this year. Yeah, so this is a little bit about who I am as a person, my journey into this sort of life of metaphysical, intuitive mediumship, magical stuff. And yeah, I would love to keep sharing this journey with you. I would love to know what you want to know about. I would love to meet you all and talk to you, and yeah, go from there. I think it could be really fun.